the recipe and tutorial will be live on Monday, maybe late Sunday, on the website at bakingwithcolette.com. And quick puff pastry is classic. Sometimes it's called quick, sometimes it's called blitz, but we are not going to layer butter and dough together. We're going to just do it all in one go. So normally, puff pastry uses all-purpose flour because all-purpose flour has protein, good amount of protein, not as much as bread, but more than pastry or cake flour. So it's going to give our puff pastry a little bit of structure. But if you're using, how can I say this? If you're using all-purpose flour that's not King Arthur, I guess that was pretty blunt. If you're using the King Arthur all-purpose flour, great. Use 100% all-purpose flour. If not, do half all-purpose and half bread so that the puff pastry has a little structure. Now, I just said hi to Renee, one of my graduates from the Art Institute, and I'm sure I have folks from Cordon Bleu here. So the next step for those of you who made puff pastry in school or maybe have made it before, one thing that's normally said is to dissolve the salt in the water. But I found the salt doesn't want to dissolve, especially in these modern times when we're using all different kinds of salt. Sometimes kosher, sometimes sea salt, sometimes pink Himalayan. So I just threw the salt in with the all-purpose flour and the bread flour, and we're going to mix it for a couple, like 20 seconds, just to get it combined. We are using the mixer. You can also use a food processor. You can go at it by hand, but I think most of you have mixers, so this is what we're doing. Now the butter is cut into pieces that look like that. They're about 3/4 by 3/4 of an inch, and the butter is cold. Cut it up, put it back in the fridge. And then it is hot. I mean, this is like a little insane, but who cares? We're kind of crazy. We're bakers. And it is the same amount of flour as the same amount of butter, all right? And here's the thing. I'm going to turn on the mixer and it's going to bounce. So stand back, okay? Oh, not too bad. And I'm going to bring it right here so you guys can see. So I have it on low speed, and we're using the paddle attachment, and it's going to break up that butter. And I have ice cold water right here, and if you want, you can add about a half teaspoon of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice to the water. Why don't I do that? Because that little bit of acid cuts the gluten strands as we are producing our puff pastry, and that makes it even more tender. And I'll be super articulate about that in the recipe on the website so you understand why. You might remember back in the fall when we were making pie dough like crazy, we were always adding a little bit of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice. All right, that's it. Now, as soon as the butter is about the size of hazelnuts, you're gonna stop. All right, I also have a bowl scraper here, and you can use your hand, and you can just get in there and kind of just toss everything together. Make sure that there's nothing, there's nothing sticking to the bottom of the bowl. Now, as I said, this was, it happens to be 227 grams of the combined flours, 227 grams, 2 sticks of butter, and now we're doing 113 half of cold water and that little whisper of apple cider vinegar. All right, I'm dumping it in. We're gonna mix on low speed. And if I wasn't talking, this would be much quicker. And you can pulse. And if you're doing this in your food processor, you're going to be pulsing. The mixer doesn't like it, but we don't torture our mixers often like this. As soon as it clears the bowl, as you guys can see, stop. And now we're going to get it out of the mixer and onto our work surface. It feels good, and because we use that ice cold water, it's cold. And those of you who make croissants or Danish or any laminated doughs, even biscuits or scones, you know we get more flake when our dough is cold. I mean, we don't laminate biscuits and scones, obviously, but you know what I mean. Whenever we're working, when we are working where we want fat to be cold, then we can start with cold liquid. All right, everybody. So here's our blob of dough, and it is in frame. Now, puff pastry, classic French puff pastry, gets something called a book fold. And I'm going to show you that in just a second. So we're going to throw down flour so that this doesn't stick. And the great part about this is that this quick puff pastry is perfect for anything that's going to be flat. Or if you're going to wrap, like I was talking to one of our bakers this week, Cyrus, and he asked me, he had messaged me, what are we doing on the show? And I said, quick puff pastry. And he said, can I use that for beef Wellington, where you take puff pastry and you wrap a filet mignon in it? Yeah, totally. Oh, you can do those individual too. And you know, salmon fillets would be pretty yummy as well. All right, what we're gonna do, we're gonna be generous with the flour. And you can see that I'm just kind of tapping it out. And you can see nice chunks of butter. That's perfect. All right, so now my goal is to roll this out to an approximate 6 by 14 inch rectangle, which means you need your yardstick cut in half. Bakers, I cannot advocate enough for getting a yardstick, cutting it in half, and keeping it in your baker's toolbox. Please, 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 if you have taken that advice, let me know in the comments, because it's just such a game changer. So 6 inches, and then by about 14 inches. And why is this a game changer? Because it just naturally, the rulers act like tracks. We get effortlessly, we get a 1/4 inch thickness.